Hello friends, I am Brian Cameron, recording this in Dundas, Ontario. It's been a real thrill and honor for me to prepare this presentation for the 49th ABS conference. My wife Pat and I attended the second ABS in Bolton, Ontario, where there were way fewer than 100 people. But look at us now. We could not have imagined 1,900 attending a conference about Baha'i scholarship. Here's a screenshot of the ABS presenters. Top left is Laureen Pierre from Guyana, then my wife Pat and I in Dundas, and Jim Ferguson in Michigan. On the lower left are Jamshid and Molly Aidun in Toronto, and Shoma Saha in the American Northeast. I'm recording this presentation alone, but will do my best to highlight my colleagues' key talking points. Within one eventful year after turning 20, I became a Baha'i, met my future wife Pat, and started medical school. We pioneered to the South Pacific and eventually returned to my hometown of Hamilton, where I've had a fulfilling 25-year career. I've always been involved in surgical education and have had the opportunity to be a national leader in the evolving discipline of global surgery, including making almost 30 visits to Guyana to assist with their surgical training program. This ABS meeting is in Calgary, which is very special for me. I was a surgical resident here and at the hospital a lot. However, evidently I was home occasionally because Jeff and Blair were born here. And Calgary was also where I first met Dr. Jamshid Aidun. This quotation from the Rizwan message of 2024 has served as an inspiration to me over the last year and really exemplifies to me some of the qualities of Dr. Jamshid Aidun. The call to service is an uplifting, all-embracing summons. It attracts every faithful soul, even those weighed down by cares and obligations. For in all the ways in which that faithful soul is occupied can be discovered deep-rooted devotion and a lifelong concern for the well-being of others. Such qualities give coherence to a life of manifold demands. I first visited Dr. Aidun in Guyana in 1996 when he was 67. He was coordinating the Bahá'í Community Health Partnership, the BCHP, in the remote Rupununi region. Dr. Aidun kept a home in Guyana for 20 years after that, finally retiring to Toronto in his 80s about a decade ago. A few years ago, I visited Dr. Aidun. He was telling me amazing stories about his time in Guyana. When I asked if he'd thought about writing his memoirs, he demurred. So I decided to take on the project, and he agreed. So Pat and I returned to the Rupununi 2 years ago to find out about the impact of the BCHP a generation later. I had no idea how many stories there were, how many people had been inspired, and how extensive are the present-day ripple effects of that Baha'i development project a generation ago. One of the hardest things about writing this book was to try to present a balanced viewpoint. We are discouraged from writing idealized accounts of people. We don't have saints in the faith. Dr. Jamshid Aidun, however, really is an example of a humble posture of learning. This story is really two stories of transformation, the healing of a community and the healing of one individual. We learn how to be through the stories of others. As this letter written on behalf of the Guardian said, use your stories to become a source of inspiration and guidance. And this is what I've tried to do. Why did Dr. Aidun end up in Guyana? Well, Dr. Aidun was a Persian-Canadian surgeon who had migrated from Iran to Canada in 1963. He was a successful urologist in Brandon, Manitoba, very active in the Baha'i community as an auxiliary board member, and a lifetime member of this society, the Association for Baha'i Studies. This is Jamshid's wife, Gol, mother of Layla, Seema, and Vahid. She was a traveling teacher dynamo inspired by Martha Root to visit over 100 countries, and also an academic who presented here on Mishkan Kalam. In 1987, Dr. Aidun was a busy surgeon, father, grandfather, and nearing retirement when he was suddenly widowed. Gol died tragically while travel teaching in India. It shattered Dr. Aidun. 2 years later, counselor Dr. David Smith phoned Jamshid and asked him to pioneer to Guyana to assist with a national teaching project. A literal phone call to service. Let me tell you about the Rupununi region when Dr. Aidun arrived there in 1992. Guyana is an English-speaking country, population 750,000, located on the Caribbean coast of South America, nestled between Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname. This is Georgetown on the coast, where most of the population is located. After decades of decline under a post-colonial dictatorship, Guyana was the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Education and health infrastructure had been supported by the British colonizers and the churches, but it was in decay. In the Bahá'í community, there had been successful mass teaching projects, and most of those Baha'is and most of the population were located along the coast of the Caribbean, with very few in the hinterlands. The Rupununi region, outlined by the red circle and adjacent to the Amazon rainforest, contained 3% of the country's population over a vast area, 1 person every 2 square miles. It was the most remote and underserved region of the country. Most people were indigenous, living off of their own land. There were no paved roads, mostly savanna trails leading to 40 villages, each with 50 to 100 people. There were no telephones, no electricity, and mortality rates for pregnancy and infants were 10 to 20 times that of Canada. The most recent part of Guyana's story is something completely different, and they are now an emerging petrostate with one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The goal of the Bahá'í Community Health Partnership in the Rupununi was to deliver community health education, medical services, training, and mentoring, and to achieve local sustainability by phasing itself out within 10 years. This photograph illustrates the reality of development work in the Rupununi. This truck is one of the few vehicles in the region, and it was brought in from the outside. But there are no bridges over the rivers, so the only way to get it across the river is through local ingenuity. This pontoon was locally constructed and pushed across the swollen river. Outsiders were both teachers and learners, and Dr. Aidun approached his role with humility. Everyone has the capacity to teach and lead others. And as Dr. Aidun said, we are building up people, not building up buildings. So what is this book about? For anyone interested in social justice and international development, has probably asked the questions, what is development? How can we truly partner with others who differ from us? How can we heal others, heal ourselves, and heal our planet? And what are the roles of the individual, the community, and the institutions in this process? These are some of the questions that the book attempts to address indirectly through the story of the Bahá'í Community Health Partnership. I chose this phrase, somewhere over the rainforest, to evoke an almost magical atmosphere of the Rupununi, where fantastic things happen, and there are stories of courage, intelligence, and love. This writing project consumed 3 years of research, including over 30 interview subjects. Jim, Shoma, and Laureen have contributed significantly. Many of the other incredible stories came from local Indigenous health workers that I met when Pat and I revisited the Rupununi in 2023, and some of them are pictured here. I'm very grateful to them. I need to give a big shout out to Brian and Pam O'Toole, whose lifelong learning about community development, literacy, and youth empowerment in Guyana is so well captured in Brian's book, Educational Leadership, A Guyanese Perspective. It's available through the online Baha'i bookstore. The next presenter is Jim Ferguson, who is a physician associate and a Baha'i of 60 years. As a medical provider, he has worked extensively with First Nations peoples in North America, and he spent 2 months with Dr. Aidun serving the Amerindian people of the Rupununi in Guyana in 1994 and 1995. That experience served as a catalyst for him to pursue his MPH and ignited his interest in traditional Indigenous healing remedies, which later motivated him to enroll in a fellowship in integrative medicine. He is currently authoring a curriculum for First Nations health workers in the United States. Jim says, quote, "My service experiences in the Rupununi with Dr. Aidun have been one of the most influential experiences of my life." Jim was also an early member of Health for Humanity, which I encourage you to learn more about, and which developed a supportive partnership with the BCHP in Guyana. Jim was mentoring mid-level community health workers in Alaska, and when he got to Guyana, he discovered there was a similar role, but they were functioning with very little support. However, they were keen to learn. The project developed health education pamphlets and traveled to remote villages to deliver workshops, see patients, and mentor health workers. This upper left picture shows Jim giving a talk on one of the topics of nutrition, immunization, or malaria, or one of the other dozen health education pamphlets that the project prepared. And below is a traveling team with Dr. Aidun on the left, Brian O'Toole, and Jim has the hat on, and just in front of him is Laureen Pierre, who you'll hear more about in a minute. Jim learned from Dr. Aidun to step back, watch, learn, and offer suggestions. The local health workers had capacity and experience. They just wanted mentoring. Jim was able to take his experience working with health workers in remote areas of Alaska and found it quite relevant to the remote regions of Guyana. In both places, there were Indigenous peoples of capacity, often underestimated. It touched Jim greatly when Winston Pugsley, a local school principal in the Rupununi, said to Jim, "When you go home, please give our love to our cousins in the cold country." The most innovative component of the Baha'i Community Health Partnership was the election of village health boards in each community. There were only a handful of Baha'is in the region, and most of the villagers were Christian, so the team had to be careful to be non-denominational and not proselytize. This was at the beginning of the development of the Ruhi Institute materials, and you can see the similar materials and workshop approach that has proven so effective globally since then. Over 30 village health boards were elected, and the team led 6 workshops for each group. The topics included nobility of man, consultation, moral leadership, service, realizing our potential, and creating a vision. And the goal was to make the project sustainable with the local institutions in charge. I've talked about the individual and the community, so just a word about the local institutions. This is the National Baha'i Center in Guyana. After several years of mass teaching projects, 6% of the population of Guyana, about 40,000 people, had enrolled in the Baha'i faith in 1992. Unfortunately, there was not an effective institute process in place at the time, and most of those have drifted away. However, there were some very strong and experienced leaders, and the National Spiritual Assembly responded to the call from the Universal House of Justice to incorporate social and economic development into their regular pursuits. The NSA engaged with the World Center and the counselors and formed the Guyana Office of Social and Economic Development, known as GOSED. Later, this was transformed into an independent, non-governmental organization, the Varka Foundation, which could partner with other NGOs, including CEDA and the European Community. In consultation with the Ministry of Health, VARCA initiated the Bahá'í Community Health Partnership in a remote region of the country with few Baha'is. Dr. Aidun moved there full-time as the local coordinator. The next segment of the presentation was prepared by Laureen Pierre, so I should briefly introduce her. Dr. Laureen Pierre is an educator, an Indigenous person from the northwest region of Guyana. She's been involved in research and socioeconomic development among Guyana's Indigenous peoples. She was a researcher at the University of Guyana and coordinator of the Community-Based Rehabilitation Program, also known as CBR, when she became part of the VARCA Foundation. Her involvement there influenced the direction of her academic studies, leading to a doctoral degree in education from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Later, returning to Guyana, she was the principal of the Beena Hill Institute and Youth Learning Center in the Rupununi, working with Indigenous youth and providing leadership training. Laureen was recently recognized by Guyana's Ministry of Amerindian Affairs for her, quote, tremendous contributions towards the preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge and for being a role model to Indigenous women. She now serves on the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Guyana. Laureen reflects about the philosophical conception of partnership that underpinned the collaboration between the VARCA Foundation and the BCHP and the Indigenous peoples of the Rupununi. This photograph shows a resident coordinator of the Community-Based Rehabilitation Program on the left. In the middle is a local teacher and Mukushi villager. And on the right is a BCHP volunteer, a visitor. This is a visual image of the forged partnerships, all doing the same dance. The use of the arts was a key feature of the BCHP workshops, and at the end of each workshop, the local villagers would put together a cultural show incorporating the various messages and learning that had taken place. Abdu'l-Baha said, quote, we should attach great importance to the indigenous population of America. Likewise, these Indians, should they be educated and guided, there can be no doubt that they will become so illumined as to enlighten the whole world. This quotation from the Universal House of Justice captures the essence of the approach that guided the VARCA Foundation and the BCHP efforts. In the context of working with a population that was experiencing socioeconomic disparities and were considered as second-class citizens, the Baha'is had to be mindful of avoiding the dichotomy of developed and underdeveloped. The practice of dividing the world into dichotomous groups of the developed and the underdeveloped, of the advanced and the backward, is foreign to Baha'i efforts in the field of development, indeed to all endeavors. VARCA and the BCHP understood the need to identify, nurture, and support local resources. This process often included consultations during workshops, simple data gathering by local village teams, and personal interactions. It was important to create a sense of inclusiveness, so that each person had something to contribute to the upliftment of their community, and to present the contributions of the BCHP as complementing or supporting local efforts and resources. One important strategy in the early phase of the project was to focus on empowerment. Turning to the Baha'i writings proved to be highly effective. BCHP workshops participants engaged in the study and reflection on Baha'i quotations using the pamphlets previously illustrated and Ruhi methodology. Here are a couple of examples of quotations used in the workshop resource pamphlets. Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Noble have I created thee, yet thou hast abased thyself. Rise then unto that for which thou wast created. These are familiar, but there's always new depths of learning that take place when discussing them with new participants. Over time, this strategy contributed to changing perspectives of self in positive ways. Individuals became inspired and confident to take on new responsibilities, to aspire to and achieve new goals. Individuals, teams, and villages were encouraged to re-examine their communities, to read their own reality, to identify and utilize local resources, and to play an active role in improving their well-being. BCHP volunteers found ways to demonstrate appreciation for cultural beliefs, customs, and traditions, while at the same time modeling the principles and standards of the Baha'i faith. It was important to observe protocols involving village and regional governing institutions. For example, Guyana honors the spirit of cooperation amongst Indigenous peoples through a national celebration called Mashramani. The BCHP incorporated and nurtured the spirit of cooperation among villages and organizations that it collaborated with. Service, self-reliance, and sustainability were watchwords and concepts that were embedded in the project. Transformation was at the heart of the BCHP activities. This often meant engaging with traditional and new perspectives and ways of being and doing. The BCHP constantly engaged in consultation with members of the villages, identifying and nurturing individual potential and exploring options. It was part of the process of finding the balance. At a time when villagers themselves were focusing on improving leadership, the BCHP provided a space for examining traditional ways of leading and promoting the concept of servant leadership. In this respect, Dr. Aidun himself served as a wonderful example to the medical professionals with whom he worked and for those who followed after the BCHP came to an end. Hospital equipment, a vehicle for assisting with transport for medical services, and a resident medical doctor were among the BCHP contributions to the Rupununi as a region. But it was really the work that Dr. Aidun spearheaded and those who volunteered and served with him in the area of improving health and health education at the village level that have the most lasting effect on the lives of the people of the Rupununi. Our final presenter was Shoma Saha, MD, MS. Shoma has worked in global public health for over 25 years. Dr. Saha is president and CEO of Wellbeing and Equity in the World, and previously led the 100 Million Healthier Lives Initiative funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Her master's thesis evaluated Guyana's Bahá'í Community Health Partnership, and she still visits there regularly. This is Shoma's picture of the welcoming party at a Rupununi village when Dr. Aidun's team arrived to see patients with the health worker, give health education talks to the villagers, and consult with the village health board. Based on her experience in Guyana, initially as a graduate student, Shoma has built her global public health career and shared the learning through a number of initiatives that I encourage you to look at. This 100 Million Healthier Lives project is one example. And this is a picture that Shoma often shows in her talks. This is Eugene McCabe, a community health worker in the Rupununi, and someone Shoma calls a brilliant innovator. With his village health board, they were able to lower the incidence of malaria 90% in 1 year, while eliminating malnutrition amongst widows. Remarkable. The problem, as they put it together, was that they couldn't afford to buy mosquito nets from the outside, and they also noted that there were poor widows in the village. So the village health board organized the widows to make a sewing cooperative to make mosquito nets that they could then trade for food. Shoma said this wasn't a solution that anyone from the outside world could have seen or had the trust to execute. What Shoma learned from this experience was a powerful way of being and doing that she has shared with the rest of the world. Ripples indeed. The philosophy of we in the world is to move from me to we, from isolation to interconnectedness, from pathology to vision, from poverty to potential, from scarcity to abundance, from having answers to asking questions, from perfect planning to learning and failing forward, and embracing system transformation. Since launching the 100 Million Healthier Lives in 2014, and since then, We in the World, the movement has over 800 members in more than 30 countries worldwide. I encourage you to look at the We in the World website to learn more about their activities and get involved. They ask the questions: whose life will get better because we're here? Who isn't thriving? What would it take for that to change? This example is only one of the many ripples from the Rupununi. Dr. Aidun and the Bahá'í Community Health Partnership have impacted a generation. There is still much that we can learn as we move forward together in social action. I will finish with Shoma's invitation to be better ancestors. This is one of the initiatives to grow out of We in the World. I love the concept. Let us all think of the 7 generations after us, and let us be better ancestors. In the words of Abdu'l-Baha, look ye not upon the present, fix your gaze upon the times to come. In the beginning, how small is the seed, yet in the end it is a mighty tree. Look ye not upon the seed, look ye upon the tree, and its blossoms, and its leaves, and its fruit. On the left is a beautiful, healthy mango tree filled with ripe mangoes. And I remember Dr. Aidun and working with the village health boards to develop projects to dry mangoes so they'd have fruit available throughout the year. Underneath the tree is gathered the village health board with the community to consult about their health initiatives and needs. On the right here is the recent picture of Jamshid and Molly Aidun. And I think I'll give the last word to Dr. Aidun. When somebody asked him, just before he went to live in the Rupununi, are you really sure that you want to go and live in that remote area where there's so much malaria and they don't have any resources and they don't even have electricity or roads? And Dr. Aidun said, well, somebody has to do it.